with thunderous footfall and monstrous roar. The behemoth is a singular beast of titanic proportions. At once both wondrous and frightful, it is truly a creature of biblical awe. Lumbering and frightful, the massive behemoth is a terrifying creature of unmatched size and strength. Although herbivorous, the behemoth poses a threat to numerous cities and civilizations as it consumes whole forests and cultivated land, drinking entire rivers dry while indiscriminately trampling any and all unfortunate enough to be caught under its mighty tread. The behemoth is supposedly the first creature to have been created, and due to its epic and destructive size, there were no more than one brought into existence. Indeed, its power requirements are so great that it draws energy directly from the sun when, during summer solstice, its power has accumulated so much that it is able to lift itself upon its hind legs and lets out a mighty roar, felt by the entire world. This roar frightens all creatures into passivity. From lions to lambs, no creature's heart is brave enough to face this terrifying reminder of this immediate and ultimate beast. With bones and limbs like metal, there is little that can harm this creature. Even time fails to remove from it its vigor, making it effectively immortal. It is said that only the sword of its creator deity can kill it. However, the eternal nemesis of the behemoth, the Leviathan, shall nevertheless attempt to battle it to the death at the end of the world. Despite this creature's terrible and frightening existence, its fate is ultimately an unhappy one. The sword that is meant to kill it will at last bring it to slaughter, as its flesh will become a feast for those who survive the end of the world, eaten in celebration of the defeat of evil. Regardless of its ill fate, the behemoth is nevertheless a wonderful, albeit terrifying creature to behold, and shall surely spark fear in the hearts of all who hear its terrifying cry. The behemoth is an essential biblical creature, and comes to us predominantly from Hebrew and later Christian writings. As such, much of its cultural influence is tied to this religious background, with the most obvious connection being found in the Christian Apocalypse and some previous Apocrypha. However, this connection becomes somewhat confused. At times, the behemoth is benign and hardly poses a threat to any creature on Earth, apart from having an intimidating size. Although much like the Leviathan, its name eventually becomes a synonym for Satan. Alas, the reasons for this are hard to identify, but this perhaps has something to do with its role in the Christian Apocalypse, as one of the battling titans along Leviathan and Ziz. Within Christian writings, the behemoth serves to demonstrate the insignificance of man compared to the power of God, where God not only created, but controls this monstrous beast. Indeed, this size and power has seen the creature live on as an adjective in modern culture, where awe-inspiring works of machinery or large creatures and structures will often be described as a behemoth. Consequently, there are few creatures that directly resemble the behemoth. As such, things are predominantly drawn in comparison to it. Creatures such as King Kong and Oliphants, as well as some real creatures such as dinosaurs, are examples of a behemoth. However, this creature is often underserved in popular culture in favor of its counterpart, the Leviathan. As such, we do not often see the behemoth outside of religiously related works, although the genre of giant monster films does preserve the spirit of this beast. Another source of representations of the behemoth occurs in high fantasy. Although often obscure, a keen eye can identify these creatures as they are mentioned throughout these various mediums. Related to Thomas Hobbes' work, Leviathan, a sequel book entitled Behemoth, which expands upon the concepts in the original book, was created. In Behemoth, Hobbes explores the British Civil War and contrasts the ideas presented in Leviathan. Alas, beyond this, there are few modern representations of the behemoth outside the aforementioned schlock films and fantasy worlds. Nevertheless, its influence on language and subsequently ideas remains profound. Once invoked, the name of behemoth exactly apprehends the concept of size and awe in all who hear it. The mythical origin of the behemoth is quite a simple endeavour to trace, which, as mentioned, comes from Hebrew writings of a massive land herbivore. These writings have been passed down and spread through other Abrahamic religions. However, what is somewhat more difficult is discovering the real-world inspiration for the behemoth. Unlike the whale-inspired Leviathan, cultural historians are less certain as to the material inspiration of the behemoth. To further discover what might have created the idea of this creature, we look to the book of Job, which describes it thus.
Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox. Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief in the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. Surely the mountains bring him forth food, where all the beasts of the field play. He lieth under the shady trees in the covert of the reeds and fens. The shady trees cover him with their shadow. The willows of the brook compass him about. Behold, he drinketh up a river, and hasteth not. He trusteth that he can draw up Jordan into his mouth. He taketh it with his eyes. His nose pierceth through snares.
From this we are given a strange image of a mighty creature, with hard and heavy bones and an insatiable vegetarian appetite, which describes many modern large herbivores. What is particularly odd is the focus on this creature's generative organ, which is described as being quite large and impressive, along with its stomach, making for a rather odd animal indeed. Interestingly, the habits of this creature are also described. It is depicted as being quite sedentary, leisurely drinking up water or resting in the shade of a tree and among reeds. As such, we can gather that the behemoth is not a particularly aggressive animal, and the extent of its power seems to reside entirely in its capacity to consume. What's more is that it is intelligent and able to disarm traps with its nose, further expanding upon its already queer shape. Like most Hebrew and Near Eastern mythical creatures, such as the unicorn, the behemoth is most likely based on a real-world animal that time and culture have misapprehended. Initially, we might consider the hippopotamus, an animal commonly found in the area from which the myth originates. Both large and with an impressively wide jaw, the hippo is an adequate candidate for the mythical inspiration of the behemoth. Dangerous and seemingly capable of swallowing an entire river, while also often seen meandering among reeds. It matches some parts of the depiction found in the book of Job. Nevertheless, there are a few discrepancies between the hippo and the behemoth myth, prompting us to look to other animals, such as the Asian elephant. Easily one of the most awe-inspiring creatures ancient peoples could encounter, the Asian elephant is decidedly larger than its African counterparts, and we find many similarities between the description of the behemoth and an elephant. From its massive size to its insatiable appetite and thirst, it often rests under trees and can even occasionally be seen playing in mud and rivers. With a large belly, an impressive trunk, and quite intelligent as well, the elephant would seem to match the behemoth more adequately than the hippo. Furthermore, there are two interesting points to consider when comparing the habits of these creatures to that of the behemoth. Firstly, the behemoth is described as being a single creature, with no mating partners. Seeing as hippos are both very social animals and are rarely seen alone, we can easily exclude them as a potential behemoth candidate. Elephants too are rather social animals. However, male elephants are the exception. After reaching sexual maturity, male elephants are known to wander from group to group, mating with various female elephants, spending a large proportion of their lives alone. It is then not hard to imagine that the depiction of a behemoth as a lone, singular beast can stem from sightings of a single wandering male elephant. Secondly, and perhaps more obviously, regarding the behemoth's ability to rear up and roar is something elephants are well known to do. However, whether they would do so naturally without human prompting is questionable. Nevertheless, this bipedal trumpeting is certainly reminiscent of the behemoth's own conduct. In both the elephant and the hippo, we can find aspects of the behemoth, from size to habit and habitat. However, it would certainly appear that the elephant matches the myth far more accurately than the hippo, although neither real-world creature entirely matches the mythical behemoth. It is probably that, similar to the basilisk, the behemoth draws aspects of many large creatures while using the Asian elephant, specifically the male elephant, as the primary inspiration for this pervasive myth. The behemoth in general is not particularly difficult to reify, with only a few modifications to the original myth being required. Like its kindred Leviathan, we see the natural fossil record is full of massive creatures. From mighty mammals such as the Megatherium to the Titanic sauropods of the Jurassic, it is well within the realm of possibility for land-dwelling creatures to grow to an exceptional size. However, it should be noted that this size is completely dwarfed by those creatures who live in the ocean. As demonstrated with the Leviathan, aquatic animals often grow to concerning size. However, the biblical depiction of the creature consuming entire mountains of forests in a single meal is far beyond the energy requirements of any creature on Earth. Such a massive diet would be quite unsustainable. Indeed, a creature of such voracious appetite would certainly bring catastrophe wherever it wandered, and may well render all other life but itself extinct. Interestingly, the behemoth's diet doesn't end with vegetation, but in fact extends to solar energy as well. We see how the myth depicts it gaining sufficient energy from the sun that it is able to lift itself up on its hind legs and roar. While creatures do use the sun for synthesis of various metabolic materials such as vitamin D in human beings, reliance on the sun directly for energy is presently beyond the access of most fauna on Earth. Therefore, we cannot expect the behemoth to absorb sunlight directly. However, we might consider several interesting aspects of living creatures that sees them becoming more active in sunlight. Most obviously, cold-blooded reptiles are significantly affected by their access to sunlight and warm temperatures in general. Since the metabolism of these animals is tied to the ambient temperature of the environment, we find that the warmer the environment gets, the more active the creature becomes. Crocodiles are perhaps the most famous example of this, where they can often be seen resting in the sun as they absorb the heat from the environment, allowing them to function more optimally. If we consider that cold-blooded reptilians are among the first land-dwelling animals on Earth, we can certainly imagine an ancient, gigantic elephantine creature to be the behemoth of myth. We might also consider the psychological effects that sunlight, and by extension summer, has on creatures. We find that during summer months, creatures are often most active, and indeed the entire environment appears to come alive. We even see this effect on human beings, most interestingly in the stock markets, where a noticeable trend of increased trade can be seen in Wall Street on sunny days. Additionally, this can also be seen in hibernating mammals such as bears. Often going undisturbed for months of sleep, these creatures' habits and lifestyles are tied directly to the presence and absence of heat and sunlight. With these two considerations, we might imagine that the behemoth is not a strange photosynthetic creature, but rather we can justify its behavior as a natural extension of what we already observe in nature. Whether the behemoth is driven by a cold-blooded nature, or whether it's simply more lively from sunlight, remains up to us to choose. Either way, the general form and behavior of the behemoth is certainly well within the realm of possibility. If we accept that the Asian elephant inspired this myth, this could well mean that the behemoth still walks among us today. Of course, we cannot forget that there are stranger things in heaven and earth than science can describe. Considering that we are coming to the end of an ice age, we may well be startled to discover what creatures were hibernating through this coldest of ages.